Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. Just going to review interpreting rational numbers. All right, so I have a number line here, and the first thing I want to figure out is what these intervals are between my 0 and my positive 1, and my 0 and my negative 1. So I need to know what these are going by. What intervals are these? So let's see. We know it's going to have to be a decimal because anything between 0 and 1 whole has to be a decimal. So let's see if it's going to be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. Well, after 0.4 would come 0.5, but you notice I have a whole number 1 there. So I know that these are not going by tenths in single digits. So let's see what we can do next. So let's erase those. So maybe it is going by 2's, as in 2/10. All right, so let's double check. So let's see, 0.2, and then 0.4, and then 0.6, 0.8. The next one would be 1 whole. So it looks like they are going by 2/10. So this is important. Remember, I talked to you about number lines, and you have to first figure out what the intervals are before graphing any points. So in this case, these are going by 2/10. All right, it would be the same on my negative side. This would be negative 0.2, negative 0.4, negative 0.6, negative 0.8, and then negative 1 whole. All right, so that's important, especially when you are going to be doing this assignment. Okay, now let's say you had to graph negative 0.7. Well, we know it's going to go on the left side of my 0 because that's the negative side of my number line. But if you notice, my tick marks, none of them are negative 0.7. Well, that's because it's going to come right in the middle, right in between negative 0.6 and negative 0.8. So I would plot this as negative 0.7, right in the middle. If I needed to graph 0.5, well, that's a positive, so I'm looking at the right side of my number line. I don't have a tick mark that is labeled 0.5, but 0.5 comes right in the middle of 0.4 and 0.6. All right, or we would say that as 5/10. 5/10 comes right in the middle of 4/10 and 6/10. So right in the middle, you would plot a point for graphing. Okay, so let's say you were scuba diving and you were diving to certain depths here. So you're diving 3 2/3 meters, you are diving 1.5 meters, and you are diving 4.5 meters. Now, if I wanted to know, I wanted you to represent these numbers, these depths, as rational numbers. All you would do is to represent these as rational numbers is make them negative. So negative 3 2/3, then negative 1 1/2, and negative 4 1/2. So remember what we talk about in class. An integer is any whole number, positive or negative. A rational number is any number, positive or negative, whole number, fractions, or decimals. So integers have to be whole numbers. Rational numbers can be whole numbers, decimals, and fractions. So if we wanted to represent these depths as rational numbers, we would take them and make those negative. Okay, now let's say we had these temperatures, 2.3 degrees Celsius, negative 3.65 degrees Celsius, negative 2.5 degrees Celsius, and 4.6 degrees Celsius. And I wanted to know what the absolute values of these are. Remember, absolute value has to be positive because it is just the distance the number is away from 0, okay? And distance cannot be negative. So 2.3 degrees Celsius, the absolute value of that is going to be 2.3 because it is 2.3 units away from 0 on the number line. Negative 3.65 degrees Celsius, the absolute value of that is going to be 3.65 because it is 3.65 units away from 0. Negative 2.5 degrees Celsius, the absolute value of that is equal to 2.5 because it is 2.5 units away from 0. And 4.6 degrees Celsius, the absolute value of that is equal to 4.6 because it is 4.6 units away from 0. Absolute value can never be negative because distance cannot be represented as a negative. Okay, so I have two rational numbers here. I have negative 2.4 and 2.4. Now I want to know what type of relationship they have to 0 on the number line. Now, if I said that negative 2.4 and 2.4 are not the same in terms of their relationship to 0, would I be correct or not? So if I'm saying that they are not the same in relation to 0, I would be wrong because you know that negative 2.4 is 2.4 units away from 0. You also know that 2.4 is 2.4 units away from 0. So the distance is the same. So their relationship to 0 is the same. All right. So I would be wrong if I said that those are not the same according to 0. They are the same. They are the same distance away from 0. One is to the left on the number line. One is to the right on the number line. Okay, now let's say I had these values and I want to find the opposite of these as well as the absolute value. So I want to find the opposite as well as the absolute value of each one. So looking at my first one, the opposite of 4/5 is going to be negative 4/5. Now the absolute value of 4/5 is just going to be 4/5. It's the distance away from 0, so that has to be positive. For my second one, negative 3.18, the opposite of that is going to be positive 3.18. And the absolute value of negative 3.18 is 3.18 because it has to be positive. Now for my last one, the opposite of negative 1 2/3 is going to be positive 1 2/3. And the absolute value of negative 1 2/3 is 1 2/3 because it must be positive for absolute value. All right, so that's pretty simple. Okay, so we talked about the different intervals on number lines. So here I have to figure out what these tick marks each represent. So if I look here, I have 0 and I'm going to the right and I have 1. So I have to figure out which each of these tick marks is equal to. So let's see, we're going to try tenths. 0.1 or 1/10, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 1 whole. Okay, so these are going by 1/10. So if I look at this, I would say this first tick mark is going to be 0.1. Let me just change my color. So this first one's going to be 0.1. The second one would be 0.2, 0.3. I'm just alternating because I don't have enough space. This one would be 0.4, 0.5, and so on. Same thing going to the left. This would be negative 0.1, then negative 0.2, negative 0.3. So when you're doing the assignment, make sure you know what intervals your tick marks are going